We're joined now by author Michael Lewis. His latest book, The Fifth Risk, takes readers inside the transition of power from the Obama administration to the Trump administration. Welcome.
Thank you.
What is the fifth risk?
It's the short answer to that. There's a short answer and a long answer. The short answer is it's the risks that you don't imagine. Sort of the unknown unknowns, as Donald Rumsfeld put it. But it's sort of like, if you think of the federal government, one way of thinking about it, I mean, its basic job is to keep us safe. And one way of thinking about it is this portfolio of risks that it's managing. And at any given time, it's focused on a few of them. But there are dozens of others, and we're not thinking about them. And when you have an administration like this administration that's not terribly concerned with the running of the federal government and has been really kind of negligent in the way it's gone about it, it's like, what happens to all those other risks?
Well, and explain to people what you mean by the federal government, because people would hear, well, Donald Trump says I passed tax cuts, I'm cutting regulation, I'm doing all these things.
Yeah. Well, the federal government's 2 million people, and it's an enormously complicated enterprise. And so what gets me going on this subject is the Obama administration devoted the lives of about 1,000 people over the course of a year to prepare briefings for whoever was going to run the federal government to come in the day after the election and learn about what's going on in the Department of Energy or what's going on in the Department of Education. And a lot of this is not ideological. It's like, what problems are we dealing with in the center of disease control? And how do we deal with it? How do we deal with the Ebola crisis, and how might you deal with it if it happens? And they were expecting whoever was elected to show up in the hundreds.
Right.
The day after the election, no one shows. The week after the election, no one shows. In fact, many of the briefings never happened. Right. And so the Trump administration, I think from day one, was starting from a position of ignorance. So you had the Iranian foreign minister on, and Trump came in and decided to blow up the deal with Iran. Where would you go in the federal government the day after you're elected to understand the importance of that deal? You go to, believe it or not, the Energy Department, where there are physicists who will explain to you why that deal ensured that Iran will not be able to build a nuclear bomb. The people in the Energy Department, where, by the way, they tend the nuclear arsenal, waited for months for anybody to show up to explain exactly what they did. And to this day, actually, the government has never properly been handed over.
What people don't, it's like an enormous corporate takeover where the company doing the taking over doesn't have the experience and doesn't know the job. So
and is so dismissive and contemptuous of the job that, I mean, Trump himself turned to Chris Christie, who he had deputed to handle the transition, and said at one point, look, the government, if we win, we can learn what we need to run it in 2 hours at the victory party. So this is a problem.
Explain the things that people don't think of when they think of the government that you spend so much time looking
into.
So
what I did is I was in a position where I was spoiled of choice. But I really do think you could drop a writer down in any of the federal departments right now, and he'd come away with a riveting story of risks you do not appreciate that you should appreciate. So, Commerce Department, horribly misnamed, should be called the Department of Data. I mean, it's sort of the census is there, a lot of economic statistics is there, and all the weather and climate data is there. So it's like, how do we get a picture of ourselves and our environment? And the Trump administration has basically neglected the vast majority of it. But the Weather Service, it's filled with really interesting people who are weather geeks. They have transformed weather prediction over the last 30 years. Why you aren't going to get hit by a hurricane without knowing. You can thank them for it. And it's all because of the collection of data that they put someone in there who's trying to shut down, essentially, the public's access to the data that the Weather Services generates.
And the reason people should care about it is that these people that you write about deal with the long-term problems, and politics forces politicians to only deal with what happens in 5 minutes.
Look at your show, right? You're dealing with whatever happened that day or that week. And what we got here is a portfolio of very long-term risks that if the federal government doesn't do it or manage it well, no one will. It's the only tool. And I think we got to shift the narrative. I mean, the narrative has been for a generation that this federal government is this like burden in the society. It is the society. That if it does not function well, we're doomed. And you know, Trump in this sense is kind of just a symptom, not a cause. I mean, decades and decades of rust have accumulated on this machine, and he's come in with a sledgehammer. And the question is what it means. I mean, what risks do we run as a society if we let him do what he's doing?
It seems that you're making the counter argument to Ronald Reagan used to joke that the funniest laugh line is "I'm from the government and I'm here to help you." Your argument is basically they are here to help.
Oh my! I think right. That if you were going to moneyball American society and try to identify where people are really radically misvalued, it's in the public sector right now. We are radically misvaluing the public, especially at the federal level. And there's this myth that like the private sector does all the interesting stuff, and the private sector is the engine of economic growth. It's not true. You know that. All the basic science is under the internet, Microsoft Windows, GPS. You can on and on and on. It starts with programs in the federal government that are now imperiled.
All right, Michael Lewis, we're going to have to end it there, and we'll be right back.